Hello and welcome to the next YouTube video on my channel. If you want to get better at chess, then this video is just right for you. In this video I'll show and explain you how to calculate correctly in chess. So this is part 8 of this video series. So if you haven't watched part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and 7 yet, feel free to watch them after you've watched this video. So in part 1 I've already started with the first technique and rule that you should always note in your chess games, and this was the rule of the pawn square. In part 2 I've talked about the arithmetic counting, in part 3 about the counting of attacks and defenses, in part 4 about the very important wandering square, in part 5 about the rule of the critical squares of the walkthrough pawn, in part 6 about the rule of the critical squares of the blocked pawn, and in part 7 about the rule of the matching squares. And in this video I will show and explain you the next rule, so let's get started. So in the last 7 parts, I've shown you different rules and techniques that you should always note in your chess games. And in this video, this is the last video of this video series, because in this video I'm going to just show you some other examples how to make the calculations in your chess games way easier. When you have watched the other parts and studied the different calculation techniques, you may have seen that they are not suitable for all cases that happen on the chessboard and real chess games, but only for a certain type of positions. It is true that these positions and examples which I have shown and explained you in the other videos are very common, so these techniques are very valuable. General methods of calculation which would be suitable for all cases cannot be established in chess. Each position must be approached differently depending on its content. But if the positions, despite the different arrangement of the chess pieces, is characterized with big similarities, if they are said to be typical, then they are more often their own typical techniques which are exactly for this situation or exactly for this position or example on the chessboard. The knowledge of all these techniques and rules will make the calculation in your chess games easier and faster. That's clear. It will help you to quickly and correctly decide in your position how to play and which rule technique should be used now. So from this we know how important the experience in this game is. Chess players with a lot of experience are so different to new chess players, because they know how the game will develop in every single position. Even if they have never played this position before, or the situation on the chessboard before, they will still know what and how to react and how to play, and what should be the goal in this position, because they have so much experience. So of course there are now plenty of different techniques that I could show you and explain you, but in this video I will just show you some of them. I think for me these are the most important ones. So in the position that you can see right now on the chessboard, we can see that the white army has an advantage over the black army, because they have one pawn more than the black army here. If they trade the pawns right, then they could get a free way on the last rank and transform one pawn to the queen and win the game. But if they don't do it right, then this game can also end up in a draw, or the black army can also win this game. Therefore, the question in this position here is now, how should the white army move and trade pawns to win this game? So here, doesn't matter on which square exactly there isn't a black pawn. In this case, it's c7. Then on this file, the white pawn has to start moving. So in this case, the white army should start with pawn c4, because in this case here, this pawn has the biggest chances to develop to the queen and win this game. If we change up the position a bit, for example, if the black pawn on b7 wouldn't stand on b7 but rather on c7, then the white army obviously should start with pawn b4. And if this pawn here would stand here on b7, then the white army should start with a4. That's clear. So, for example, in this position after b4, the plan of the white army should be to get all of the 3 pawns on the 5th rank. So here, pawn b5, and then both of these pawns in 2 moves each on c4, c5, a4 and a5, and here now in this position after pawn b6, the white army can get, after the both trades, a free pawn and transform it on b8 into a queen and win the game. But Let's move back again to the first position. So when here this pawn on c7 was not standing on c7 but rather on b7. Here it would be a mistake to start with pawn b4, because here after black playing pawn b5, the both pawns of white that are left now on the second rank cannot move up to the fourth rank, because if they do, then they're just going to be taken out by black's pawn on b5. Therefore, here in this position, the plan of the white army after pawn c4 should be to play pawn b4 and then pawn c5. So we can see that the pawn that has a file here, that's walkthrough pawn, he's always the first pawn who steps at the next rank. So here then b5 pawn and then pawn c6. He always steps at the next rank the first. But if the black army, after white playing pawn c4, answers with pawn a5, then you here have to be a bit accurate, because if you want to play here now pawn a3 with the idea to move this pawn on b4 after, to play pawn c5 later, then you cannot do this here. You cannot play pawn a3, because if you do, the black army will answer with pawn a4, not allowing your pawn on your a pawn to move forward, because he's blocked now, and also not allowing your b pawn to move, because here the white pawn on b2 cannot move on b3, because he's obviously going to be taken out or captured by the black pawn on a4. But he can also not move two squares up on b4, because the black pawn can just take en passant here like this and win this game. So therefore, here in this position, it should be right after pawn c4 and pawn a5 to continue with pawn b3 after black has played here pawn a5, and then pawn a3, pawn b4, and so on. And now I come to my next position. Here both of the armies have one walkthrough pawn. The white army has the a3 pawn and the black army has the c5 pawn. So a pawn who isn't blocked by another pawn on his file anymore. But white's a pawn is closer to the edge of the chessboard, and he is farther away from the king of the black army than the black pawn on c5 is away from the white king. That's obviously because here there are 1, 2, 3 squares between them, but the king stands directly close to the black pawn here. So, in this position, the movement of the white's a pawn will force the black king to move his attention away from his own pawn on c5 to the a file. And the result of this will be that the white king on c4 can take out black's pawn on c5, and then he will be way closer to the both black pawns on g6 and h7 than the black king will be to the white pawns on g5 and on h4. Therefore, the white king can, after he has taken out black's pawn on c5, rush here on the right side of the chessboard, take out both of these pawns and transform one of these pawns, also both of them, into a queen on the 8th rank and win the game without any problems. If we, for example, try to play this position here now out, considering that the white army starts, then it's obviously that the white army will start with pawn a4. On this, the black army will answer with king b6, and after the white army checks the black king with pawn a5, and the black king has captured our pawn on a5, because if he doesn't capture, the pawn can just move, continue moving up. Here, now, the white king on c4 can just, without any problems, take out the now undefended pawn, black pawn on c5, and now he's obviously closer to both of the black pawns. He will just run to them, take them both out, and continue with bringing one or both of them pawns here to the 8th rank and transform them to a queen. So we can see that because of white having a free walkthrough pawn that isn't blocked by another chess piece, in contrast to the black army where the pawn was blocked by the white king, we can see that they have won because of this, because here the black king on the a5 square is just completely lost at the edge of the chessboard right now. And now I already come to my last example, or my last position in this video. In the position that you can see right now on the chessboard, the pawn that isn't blocked by another pawn, so the pawn that is the important walk-through pawn, is the white c-pawn. That stands now here on c4. His movement will bring the black's king attention from his own pawn on e5 to him. And the result will again be that the white king can just take out black's pawn on e5 and he will be closer to black's g pawn, and the result again will be that the white pawn here on the h file will get to the 8th rank and transform into a queen. But the black army obviously will try then to get their pawn or their 8th pawn on the last rank, because then after the king will be somewhere here and the white king will be somewhere here, the black king can take out the white 8 pawn too. Therefore, it is very important for both of the armies in this position to calculate correctly here. If we start calculating now, then we see that if white starts with moving the c-pawn one square up, so on c5, checking black's king on d6, he has to take it out, because if not, the white pawn just just keeps on moving up on the 8th rank. So here the black king takes out our c-pawn, and now the white king captures black's pawn on e5. And now, if we calculate, then we will know that the black pawn on h6 needs 8 moves in total to get on the a1 square transform into a queen, and the white pawn on h2 needs also 8 moves to get on the 8th rank and transform into a queen. So both of the armies need the same amount of moves, but here in this position now, the black army starts. And it is very interesting because the black queen, which will transform from a pawn when the pawn moves from a2 to a1, this queen will then check the white king, which will stand on g7 then, because he has taken out the black pawn here, and he will prevent the white pawn on h2, which will then stand on h7, to move one square up on h8 and transform into a queen. But the game will still end up in a draw because of white's pawn being at the edge of the chessboard. But of course, the white army doesn't want to end the game up with a draw, but they rather want to win this game, obviously. And this is possible if they wait a bit with the movement of the c-pawn and start in this position now with pawn h4, bringing this pawn now two squares closer to the 8th rank. So in this position, the white army is now an advantage, because they cannot make a strong move like this, bringing the walk-through pawn 2 squares closer to the queen. So here, if after pawn h4, the only move for the black king to still defend his pawn on e5 is to move on e6. And here white just starts moving the c-pawn, now on c5, and so on and so on. So they win in this position. But if the black king moves on c5, they are both now attacking the pawns of the other army, but in this position now, the white army will get their queen 2 moves earlier than the black army, because here the white pawn is 2 squares closer to the queen. That's why we've done the move h4 before. But if the black army decides not to move with the king after pawn h4, but rather with the pawn, then they can obviously only play pawn g6, bring this pawn now closer to the white king, which is good for the white army. Obviously they cannot play pawn g5, because then the white pawn here on h5 will just instantly take it out here on g5. So they play here now pawn g6. Here you now, playing the white chess pieces, continue with pawn c5, check on the black's king on d6, the black king takes out your pawn on c5, and you capture black's pawn on e5. So here in this position now, the white army will get their queen after 6 moves, but the black army will only get their queen, in contrast to the white army, in 8 moves. So we can see that this that it's always important to calculate correctly in chess to make the better decision in every single position. I also hope that you have liked this video. If you liked it, feel free to leave a like there and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really hope that these techniques and rules that I've shown you in these 8 parts of this video series have helped you. So till next time, bye.